Bring in our regular Tuesday panel, Michael Kroger and Stephen Conroy. Stephen, a valedictory from Prime Minister or former Prime Minister Morrison. It's not something you see every day. Normally, PMs either are voted out and they don't get the opportunity to do that, or dumped by their own side and they leave. But this time, a valedictory, and it was quite a gracious departure for Mr Morrison today.
Look, I think that's fair. I think history will not treat him as kindly as he would hope. I think it's not a partisan issue. His own party were shocked and appalled by discovering that he'd sworn himself into half the cabinet positions. He had a quorum for cabinet without even having to do anything other than look in the mirror. So I think he won't be as well remembered across his own party. And by definition, our party would not have a great high regard for him. If he behaves as he's suggesting in departing, where he will just be silent and supportive of the party, I think he can slowly rebuild his stocks among people who trusted him before they discovered he'd actually taken their job without telling them. So I think there's a balance of things there. If he genuinely keeps his head down, I think he can rebuild some personal support. I don't know that the broader population of Australia will warm to him.
Michael, one of the things that he mentioned in that speech, and I think it was a gracious speech in many respects, was paying tribute to his colleague Josh Frydenberg, who he spoke to today. As Stephen said, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. Josh would have been very annoyed with him at the time of the revelations around being sworn in as Treasurer as well, that being Scott Morrison. But they did get Australia through a tough time, Michael.
Look, they did. And quite frankly, I think some of these former Morrison ministers need to get over the fact that he appointed himself, effectively sworn himself in as a minister. I mean, Greg Hunt knew. He told Hunt, and Hunt was... Hunt
Josh is still privately filthy, and you know it.
Well, I don't know that.
He's
he hasn't said that to me.
About
in my many conversations with Josh, he has not said that to me. I think they have to get over it. Why did Morrison do it?
It is all over
Morrison
Melbourne.
Did it. There was a global pandemic. And as Greg Hunt has said, he had enormous powers as health minister. If anything had happened to him, someone had to take over those extraordinary powers. So perhaps it's because I haven't been a minister. I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. It pales into insignificance in relation to Morrison's achievements. And I credit George Brandis's article yesterday, where Brandis was sitting in the room in London with Johnson, where he said Morrison out-negotiated an unprepared Boris Johnson on the UK-Australia Free Trade Agreement. That is something to talk about. AUKUS. In troubled times, that is an extraordinary achievement for Australia that Morrison also achieved. So this trivia about him swearing himself, oh, big deal, move on. I mean, did it affect anybody? No. Were any decisions made? No. It's a nothing. Morrison won the 19 election against all odds. He was a good, solid treasurer. He's been a champion of Australian middle-class values. And in contrast, by the way, to Albanese, who flies to Melbourne and goes to a Katy Perry concert when there are bushfires in Victoria, did he front at any of the bushfires? No. Morrison at least went to the bushfires. We know the holiday, blah, blah, blah. Morrison fronted up. Albanese flew from Taylor Swift to Katy Perry and didn't even bother to talk to those Victorians whose homes had been destroyed in Ballarat and other areas, Beaufort and other areas, by these bushfires. And no one in the press has paid any attention to the fact that this bloke's got another freebie on his private jet, another free concert he's gone to. No, Morrison fronted up in times of crisis, and your mate has not, Stephen.
Mate, he didn't hold the hose.
To that?
Okay, but let's be clear. Clearly, Michael, we all know that Michael detests the ABC. So he clearly hasn't watched Nemesis. He clearly hasn't watched his own colleagues absolutely give Scott Morrison a caning at every level. And I'm not talking about Malcolm Turnbull. My views on Malcolm are well known, and I've expressed them about his performance even in Nemesis. But this was a wide range of colleagues who will not for a long time forgive Scott Morrison for his behaviour, not just his political incompetence. And yes, I fully acknowledge Michael's point, he won an election. And AUKUS will probably be his most defining achievement. And that deserves some recognition, and Michael is right to make that point. But what I was talking about was inside the Liberal Party, a nemesis demonstrated over 3 long, gruelling and ugly episodes how much people in his own party detested Scott Morrison. And the person who will be clapping and cheering the loudest to give himself the best chance of winning the next election will be Peter Dutton, that Morrison, the albatross around Dutton's neck named Morrison, has finally left the building.
He's not the first person to leave this building with a few people wanting to see the back of him.
Absolutely.
They say, get a dog in politics. If you want a friend, get a dog. They make the best and most loyal friends in this place.
KG, Scott Morrison had some enemies. Well, that's a first in federal politics. I've never heard of a former Prime Minister having enemies within his own party before. I mean, Keating said of Hawke, predecessors are never good for your political health of the successor. I mean, boy, that someone had some enemies. Wow, that is a revelation. I can't believe that. Scott had some enemies. Thank goodness, Stephen, you and I, in our 40-year political careers,
have just got friends.
We've never racked up a single enemy. You and I have never racked up a single enemy. It's only that Scott Morrison's got people that doesn't like him, mate.
But Michael, take a point, Michael, you've made many, many times publicly, the Liberal Party are never good at reaching out and wrapping their arms around their former leaders, no matter how good or bad they've been. And my point is, I think it'll be a long time before the Liberal Party embrace Scott Morrison and his period as Prime Minister.
Well, I don't. I think his achievements are substantial.
They've done pretty well with John Howard, I'd have to say. But anyway, let's move to Dunkley. I want to talk to you, Stephen and Michael, about that. Stephen, how's it shaping up for Labor? Will the government hold on to Dunkley?
I think you're seeing in the last couple of days, there's been 3 national polls that have come out, and all of them have shown the same thing, that Peter Dutton has got a bit of, wind in his sails at the moment. I think that it is going to be close. I think it'll be closer than Labor think. At this point, I think Labor will just squeak in. But Peter Dutton has to win a seat like Dunkley. That's a fundamental equation, and Michael has said this on air many times. Forget the tail seats. We don't want the tail seats. Our path to victory is through those outer suburban seats. Well, this seat is a path to Peter Dutton's victory. If he can't win it off the back of 12 interest rate rises, a cost of living crisis, refugee boats turning up, the High Court decision where the government have released, because it's had to by law, rapists, pedophiles and murderers. If it can't win a seat like Dunkley with that backdrop, then Peter Dutton is going to struggle to credibly argue he can win the next election.
Michael?
Well, Stephen, that sounds like a pretty hopeless government to me. I'd be voting against the government with that record. But KG, the synonym is this, the corollary is this. The one that you've got the best comparison to Dunkley is Aston 2001, right? Peter Nugent, the popular member, passed away. People, even though there was a 3.66% swing against the Howard government in 2001, people don't like voting against the party where the member has passed away. They just feel that that's just improper. There'd be no reason for a by-election except for a death of a member. So you tend not to have these big swings in these seats because people think there's something illegitimate about voting against, the memory and the service of the previous member, which is why 3 to 4% looks like the number to me based on the best historical precedent, which is Aston in 2001. 3 to 4, less than 3, I think we haven't done well. More than 4, we have done well. There is a sneaking view around the state that it might be more than 4, might be up to 5. What we do know is if Labor lost this by-election, it would be a catastrophe for Albanese because nothing tells you that he should lose this seat based on the historical precedents, KG.
It would be a big loss if they were to, and certainly for confidence and momentum 12 months out from the next election. Gents, great to see you both, and I'll see you on Saturday. I know Stephen will be in the studio with Peter Credlin Andrew Clennell and me. Make sure you join us then. Dunkley by-election, 6 p.m, Saturday, live from Melbourne at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.